Hello. Welcome back. When we last left off, I was doing something that had to do with butter. Battles. I was making a 3D battleships clone using advanced waffle physics and something or another. I'm following a spec that the students for 270 wrote, actually, so whatever they asked for, or whatever it looks like they wrote down, is what I'm doing. They wanted a 3D battleship scan. Well, obviously I gave them the project, right? But then they had to write down how to implement it. And they said it would be a 3D battleships thing where as you get hit, you lose health and you sink into the syrup sea. I haven't done health yet. It's one of the last things I usually do. Alright, let's see where I'm at. And, how everything works. So, player one's turn to place a waffle, and I put whatever I want, and then I hit confirm, and then it's supposed to be player two's turn, and then they take turns firing at each other, and then presumably player one shouldn't be able to see where player two's waffle is, and so forth. So let's open up my script editor and see where I was at. I've got a null exception on my confirm button, which means I probably forgot to add it to my UI manager before I left off last time. Yep, no confirm button registered there, so let's find it in the UI. Verify that that's fixed. You can always test it in the game there. Cool. And then, how do I know where I left off last week? So if you're not the kind of person that leaves yourself notes, then you should start being that person, because remembering what you were doing is hard. Luckily, I'm that kind of person. I left myself to-do notes, so I'm supposed to advance the state, which I spelled wrong, but I know what I meant. I'm supposed to lock in the player position, then repeat for player 2, lock in shots, animate, and play shots. Okay. Well, let's start adding a couple of those features. So let's go with private constant new state, and we'll call this state awaiting next player. So when you are in this state, you can't see any of the waffles, and it has to, and you have to confirm that you're the other person, that you're holding the phone before you can move on. I guess that's how I'll plan it out. And then let's say I also want to make an int for the turn, so whose turn it is, so turn equals, and then let's make a couple of constants for the two players. I'll make it an integer instead of a boolean, because I don't want to limit myself to only having two players down the road. For all I know, this could be a BattleButters Battle Royale later on. Who knows? Okay, so it's player one's turn by default, and when you click the confirm button, it should advance to player two's turn. It should take you to awaiting next player state, and then it should place the waffles and all this good stuff. So if state is placing player one waffle, then we're going to say it's player one's turn to place their waffle. That looks good. Alright, let's look at what happens when it's in the awaiting state. Let's say state is awaiting next player. So state text should be let's say if turn equals player one, then the state text should be waiting player one. Let's say something else. Player one, press ready to continue. text. If it's player 2, press ready to continue. And then we'll advance the state accordingly. Okay, missed a bracket at some point there. Cool. Okay, now the downside to this is that I have to remember what the next state is. So you'll go from placing player 1 waffle to awaiting, and then you'll go to placing player 2, and then back to awaiting, and then player 1 fires, and back to awaiting, and then player 2 fires, and then back to awaiting. So that's kind of irritating. So we'll call this, since that's always an interlude, we'll call that next state. We'll track what the next state actually is supposed to be, the transitional state. So you'll always transition from state to awaiting. I guess I should document this now. State transitions go from state to awaiting to next. Next becomes state, and next is primed for the next round. Probably a better way to do state management than that. I'm debating refactoring awaiting next player to be just a boolean instead. That just basically adds an extra gate to each state before you enter it. So rather than transitioning into another state, you have like an intermediary gate that you need to pass through in order to get to the next one. That might be easier than tracking the next state all the time. I didn't think about it. Yeah, let's try it that way. Okay, so try a boolean is awaiting. This comment becomes less accurate. The transition from Java is so hard. Will be false by default, and I don't think we need the next state anymore. Alright, so in that case, if is awaiting, then we're going to do all of that stuff, and then otherwise we can process the actual state. So we won't process the state until you've released your is awaiting gatekeeping. Again, not the best state management, but works for me. Okay, let's see if that works. And then when you press the confirm button, if is awaiting, then is awaiting equals false, and we won't reset it until the entry into your next state. So this will be release the awaiting pause to enter the next state. Okay. So let's actually set this to true at the beginning and see if I have what I expect when I run it at the start there. So if I run this now, it should be saying player 1 plus ready to continue. When I hit confirm, now it's player 1's turn to place their waffle. It let me into that state. Cool. The other thing I want to do is hide all of the waffles during the awaiting state. So I'm going to have a waffle manager. And then I don't remember how waffle manager tracks its waffles. Player 1 waffle and player 2 waffle. I guess I'll just add a method here. Hide all waffles. So player 1 waffle. What do the waffles actually have in terms of components? Can I turn off the whole waffle, or should I just turn off its renderer? I don't think they actually run any script or anything, so I think just for simplicity's sake I can turn off the whole renderer. The problem is that they still need to have a position in 3D space, so I'm going to be on the safe side here, and I'm going to turn off just the renderer. If you turn off the whole object, of course it disappears, but that's probably not what you want to do most of the time if you want it to disappear, because if you turn off the whole object, then not only does it disappear, but it also doesn't do physics anymore, and its transform is gone, so you can't access its position anymore, and all that good stuff. So you need to sometimes just disable the renderer. And then there should be a show all waffles. If I end up doing this a lot, getting the renderer like this, then I'll probably end up just creating a renderer for each of them as a field, so I don't have to keep accessing get components. So this will be an individual one. I'll do hide player 1, show player 1, and then I'll do the same for the player 2 waffle. So that's going to hide player 1. It's going to show player 1. I'll do the same for waffle 2. Hide player 2. You know what? Let's be a little more object-oriented here. Let's say hide player and then take an int as an argument. It's a little bit more object-oriented. If player num equals 0, do that. Else if it's 1, then we'll do that. And I'll write the documentation here. Hides the given player's waffle. 0 equals player 1. 1 equals player 2. Shows the given player's waffle. 0 equals player 1. 1 equals player 2. Cool. Okay, now I'll go back and use these. So I will hide all waffles. Did I forget to make these public? Yes, I did. So I will hide all waffles, show all waffles, and then for the individual player turns, I'll also hide and show them. Okay, so waffle manager dot hide all waffles. So when you're awaiting, all the waffles get hidden, and when you enter another state, they're probably going to be shown. So if the state is not in the awaiting state, if it's player 1's turn, then we definitely want to have player 1's waffle showing. So it'll be waffle manager dot show player, and then I have them designated the same way here as player 1 and player 2. So it'll be show player 1. Convenience there. I probably could have linked to it in the waffle manager. A better idea, but whatever. I also have a constants class. That would probably be a better idea. Also, whatever. 270 people. These are tips for you. So, player 1's turn to place their waffle. That's lovely. This releases the as awaiting flag. Okay. Let's handle what the confirm button does in the event that you are in the placing waffle 1 state. So if you are not in the awaiting state, which I'll put as an else branch here too, then you must be in one of the different states, which means that we need to advance the state. Advancing the state means we set awaiting back to true. The state is now equal to placing player 2 waffle. We want to lock in the player's position. That one's going to stay. I don't know if we need to do that, and I don't think we do. I think it'll just stay where it is. We'll see. So I'll put a question mark there. And then the to-do will be repeat this for player 2 now. And then I also want to lock in shots, animate, and play shots. So I've got some of that stuff going on here. All right. So that's player 1's turn. Let's do player 2's turn. So placing player 2 waffle. Now we're going to reveal player 2, and we're going to hide player 1. Actually, conveniently here, whenever you enter the await state, it hides all the waffles, which means that I don't have to re-hide them during state transition. So I totally meant to do that. Nice. So now it's player 2's turn to place their waffle, and we want to place player 2's waffle based on the position. And that looks good. All right, let's see if those two states manage correctly. It's already getting pretty complicated, so let's see if those two states manage correctly. I'll put it up on the phone. All right, so it's player 1's turn. You gotta press ready to continue. It actually says confirm, but we're gonna overlook that. So once you press confirm, it's now player 1's turn to place their waffle, and the waffle appears. I'm gonna put it somewhere nice, you know, out of sight, where other dirty waffle ears can't see it. All right, I press confirm. Now it's telling me player 1 plus ready to continue. That's a bug. It should be player 2. But all right, I hit confirm. Now it's player 2's turn to place their waffle, and I'm seeing player 1's waffle still. So that's also a bug. And if I look in my game manager here, I can see that their waffles are in the same place somehow, which is odd. And if I look at the what's the thing that manages their position, waffle manager, they are two different waffles, but for some reason they ended up in the same place at the end of that phase. So let's go and work that out. Let's see what I messed up there. So I am playing with the player 2's waffle at this point, so that part's fine. I did handle the state transition. Oh, I forgot to advance turn, I think, yeah? Yeah, turn equals player 2. That should be it. Let's see. Let's advance turn before we advance state, just to satisfy my paranoia. Okay. So player 1 plus ready to continue. Cool. Put your waffle somewhere. Cool. Player 2, press ready to continue. Cool, that's correct now. Okay, but now it's still popping up player 2's waffle in the wrong place. It's popping it up where player 1's was. Oh, because I didn't reset the sliders. Duh, dummy. Well, that's definitely a giveaway. Okay, I'll need something to purge the sliders. This is the UI manager, so it has access to the sliders. So let me write a method that purges the sliders. Well, purge is such a harsh word. Let's call it reset. Slider dot. How do I set its value? It's just value every time. Gets me every time. Y slider dot value equals 0 and z slider dot value equals 0. Cool. Document for it. Resets all 3 sliders back to 0. Cool. Okay, so we've got player 1 plus ready to continue. You press that, you put your waffle wherever you want it, press confirm. Now it's player 2's turn, and you press confirm. And I actually forgot to reset those sliders. Very smart of me. So we're going to reset them. When do we want to do that? I think we probably want to do it as soon as you enter the awaiting phase. So the end of any state transition, we probably want to do that. So anytime you're inside the awaiting phase, I feel like we want to do that. I could do that in the update method. So I'll do that for now. And then, you know, realistically, I shouldn't be hiding the waffles in update because I don't want that to happen every frame. Actually, I shouldn't really be doing most of this stuff in update because I don't want it to happen in any frame. I shouldn't be updating text. I shouldn't be updating different hides and shows. All this stuff shouldn't be happening in update. The only part that actually should be happening in update is here. So waffle manager dot hide all waffles and reset the sliders. Reset the slider. So if I wanted to split this stuff outside so it's no longer in update, let's see. I guess I can do it at the end of confirm. I can make a method called state transition. Okay, and this is solely for just not doing a bunch of stuff in update, which is kind of an overrated thing anyway. Update can handle quite a bit before it starts to break down, but since you're all in the interest of preserving efficiency for mobile, I guess I should show you what kind of stuff should be in update and what kind of stuff should not. So this stuff, not in update. Vector updates and things will be in update. So all of that stuff that has to do with the state transition I will put in this method, and the only thing that I will leave in update is the changing of the waffles to match the position of the sliders. So physics related stuff, basically. So at the end of confirm, we will perform a state transition, and then the update method will do the rest, hopefully. Let's see if this works. It's kind of a janky approach. Alright. Well, right now nothing's popping up for current state, so that was probably a bad move. Player 1's turn to place their waffle. Whoopsie, I rotated my screen. I'm going to lock it to portrait mode later, but not at this point. So player 1's turn to place their waffle. Obviously, you see it didn't hide player 2's waffle, so that's a mistake. Player 2, press ready to continue. Now that part's fine. And now I do only see one waffle. I don't see player 1's anymore, so that part's good too. Let's see if I can fix all of that stuff. So first I do want a state transition at the very start, so let's call a state transition at the start and see if that fixes it. It does not. Okay. And now I have some other stuff going on. I've got my UI manager not liking that the player 1 waffle of waffle manager has not been assigned. And that's probably because I attempted to perform a state transition which tripped waffle manager right here in the start method before waffle manager was able to lock in its waffles, probably? Yeah, before it was able to instantiate them both. So that's an issue there. So it can be really difficult to move things out of update, and it can be very tempting to leave them in there to be lazy, but I guess I'll plow through and try to make it happen. So when can I do it outside of the start method? In order for it to trigger right away. I think the problem is that when it runs initially, these two waffles are null, and that's a prioritization issue because these two get instantiated too late for the other start method to trigger. I don't think you can instantiate them outside the constructor, but I'm going to try that. Yeah, no, that's not going to be possible because it uses a prefab. Do I want to just move it back? I guess I'll put the hide inside of the auto update. Okay, and I'm going to add that to my documented bugs list. So I like to keep that at the top of my classes. So let's call that bugs. And we'll say waffle manager.idle waffles must run in update because waffles aren't generated until the waffle manager start method triggers, which happens after the first trigger of state transition. I think that's descriptive enough, and I'll give this a name, OX over 1, and we'll call this UI based. And now let's try it out with the new state transition that is now slightly less broken. Okay, so player 1, press ready to continue. Continue. Now player 1's waffle has shown up. Let's put it somewhere. Continue. Player 2, press ready to continue. Player 2's turn to place their waffle somewhere. Let's go here. Cool. Everything looks good so far. Now we want to continue with the state management. So we're going to repeat for player 2. So if state is placing player 2 waffle, we go back to is awaiting. The turn is now player 1 again. And the state is going to be, I think, player 1 firing. Player 1 firing. Okay, so the state from player 2 goes into player 1 firing. And we're going to leave that to do there. I don't think we need to do it still. Okay, so lock in shots, then animate and play shots. So we'll probably have an animation phase or something. Or maybe the... Yeah, I guess you won't transition out of your phase until your animation is done playing out. Otherwise, you won't get to see if you have the waffle, and if the other player gets to see your animation, they can use it to determine where your waffle is based on the shots. So we're not going to transition out of the player firing state until you're done firing. So if the state is... Actually, it's closer to player 1's. Player 1 firing, then we are going to show player 1's turn to fire a shot. Okay. Now we need to figure out how shots are going to be fired in BattleButters, which wasn't really well explained, just that you fire sticks of butter towards one another. Which means that I have to go back to the drawing board and make myself some beautiful art. So let's make a cube, and let's make it butter. I can't believe it's not already butter. Get it? Okay, so 800 by 800. Butter is obviously yellow. If you've ever seen butter before, you know that it's exactly that color. And then we also want to do some fun text. I mean, we want to spice this up a little bit. So let's call this... oh man, what can I use that's not going to get me copyright strike on YouTube? Let's call this Sea of Lakes brand butter. Sea of Lakes. I only eat Sea of Lakes brand butter. And I want to rotate this. Okay. There's my butter wrapper. Flatten it. Cool. Add that to my art folder. My textures here. Put in butter wrapper. And alpha's transparency. Cool. Make a new material for that. It's going to be butter mat. It's an albedo of butter wrapper. Put butter mat on the cube. Sea of Lakes brand butter. Finger licking good. Now, butter is obviously not a cube. I mean, no one buys butter in cube form. You buy butter in rectangle form, right? Nice. Let's say I want to mess with how my texture works so that it doesn't like stretch like that. I'll try playing around with that. Instead of repeat, maybe I'll put it in clamp. Nah, it still repeats it. I don't think this is easy to do without UV wrapping it, so we're not going to bother. Okay, I'm going to play with the material a bit and change tiling, which replaces it a little. If I go with a tiling of 2, well, then I also have double up on the side, so that's kind of weird. So I'm going to stick with a tiling of 1. Yeah, that looks good. Sea of Lakes brand butter. Butter stick. The customer asked for real butter physics, which means we're going to add a rigid body to this, and it's going to be affected by gravity and all that good stuff. So we're going to give it a mass of an arbitrary unit. Let's call it 100. Butter has a mass of 100. Let's give it some drag. Go with 0.05. 1 drag is a lot of drag. 0.05 is not a lot of drag. It's like basically from usually 0 to 1 you would use, no more. We're going to keep it using gravity. It's not kinematic. Kinematic means that it's not going to react with other rigid bodies. Not going to have real collision with them. We're not going to interpolate. Yeah, we don't need that. We're not going to interpolate. We're going to use simple, discrete collision detection. Alright, cool. Butter stick. Let's add that to my prefabs. Butter stick. Butter stick. There's going to be more to butter stick later, but for now. Okay. Now, do I want the shooting of butter to be a part of the UI manager? I guess I could. I mean, I have the waffles and everything. I'd probably make it part of waffle manager. Let's call it fire a shot. Public void fire butter. I think you're supposed to be able to buy like power-ups and stuff too. So later on, you'll be able to fire other projectiles. Let's just call it fire projectile, and we'll extend that later. So I'll take vector 3 as the target, so where you're going for. And I'm going to be lazy and say that everything fires with the same force. So let's call this player 1 projectile, player 2 projectile. So you're going to be able to, I guess, buy different projectiles and use them. It didn't say anything about being able to use more than one in the same game in the requirements, so I guess we'll just go with everybody gets 1 projectile per go, and then we're going to instantiate, we'll call it game object shot. We're going to instantiate it at the waffle's position. Okay, so we're going to instantiate a projectile. And we should take an argument here for which player it is too. I guess we'll use the same mechanism that we do down here. Which player is firing the shot? Alright, let's go back back and use my constants from UI Manager so I don't end up messing this up down the road. Player 1, player 2. Easier. Okay. Player 1. Player 2. Now, yes, I've copied them, and that's not great, but okay. It's fine. We'll live. So we instantiate the projectile that belongs to each player, and we're going to instantiate it at their waffles position. So it's going to be player 1 waffle dot transform dot position. I'm going to deal with the rotation later. So let's leave myself a to do proper rotation of spawned projectile, and then I'm going to add force to the projectile, and I'll have a constant for that. I have a constant float projectile force. It's got to be enough to take you outside the grid so that there are no unhittable locations. I guess we'll see. Okay. So, shot dot. Oops. Didn't specify it outside the if statement. Okay. Shot dot get component. I'm going to find its rigid body, and I'm going to add force to it. I'm going to add explosive force to it. Nah, just add force to it. Add force to it, and I'm going to add it towards the target. And you add force towards the target. Well, if you're in 3D space and you have a point here and a point here, and you want to add force in this direction with some magnitude, you have to calculate this vector first, and then you have to set the magnitude of this vector to how much force. So calculate the direction of this vector first, and then the amount of force you're going to add will be the magnitude of that vector. So I want the vector 3 dot not the distance, not the cross, forward, I want towards. How do you get the magnitude between two? Between magnitude? No, it's not. I want the normalized vector between this game object shot, game object shooter, shooter equals player 1 waffle, shooter equals player 2 waffle. So I'll store the game object of the shooter, and then I want the normalized vector between the shooter's position minus the target's position. Oh, which is already a vector. And then I want to multiply that by the projectile force to give me the magnitude of force that I'm looking for. So I'm normalizing the position between the two of them and multiplying by the projectile force. Yep. It seems good. And then I still have to do the rotation later. So for player 1, I'm instantiating a projectile. I am placing it at the waffle's position, and then firing it off. And I actually don't want it to smack into the waffle as it comes out. So I'm going to give it some offset on the y-axis. So let's give it an offset of, let's call it 1 on the y-axis. I'm going to just smack the waffle on its way out. And the other way you could do this is to have it ignore collision. Which I'm not going to do. Alright, so Waffle Manager needs a link to this prefab. They're both going to fire butter sticks initially. Now in the UI Manager, I need to make it so that if you are in the player 1 state, it's your turn to fire a shot, and then when you hit the button, if state is player 1 firing, then we're going to transition back into awaiting. It becomes player 2's turn. It becomes player 2 firing's turn, and then I want to actually play the shot out. So Waffle Manager dot did I make it public? Yep. Dot fire. Oops. Capital W there. Waffle Manager dot fire projectile. And I want to fire it at the cube that corresponds to that slider position. And then obviously it'll be player 1 as the other argument. So how do I get the cube that corresponds to that slider position? Where did I even store that thing? It's in Grid Manager. Yeah. Do I want to get a link to Grid Manager? I could. Yeah, I'll do that. That's fine. Okay, so we'll do a... Let's split it up with update. We'll do public vector 3, get grid unit position, int x, int y, int z. And it's going to return grid xyz dot transform dot position. I think that's pretty straightforward, so I don't even need to document it. And I will connect the grid to the UI Manager. This kind of dependency buildup is a good sign that you have built up technical debt quickly, because I am having to link things quite often. And I'll be using Grid Manager dot get grid unit position, and then I'm going to be using the 3 slider values. These are floats and they need a cast. Geez Louise, what a statement, huh? That's a long one. That's object-oriented programming right there. Okay, so I got that. I gotta link them together now, so make sure the UI manager is linked to the grid manager properly, and I think we should be able to fire off a projectile here. Let's see. Okay, so player one's turn, place me waffle. What the heck? That's not supposed to happen. Player two's turn, press ready to continue. Oh boy, what did I do there? Looks like a defect in the state management, obviously, since a stick of butter just fell from the sky. So if it's placing player 2 waffle, enter state player 1 firing, player 1's turn to fire. Let's go again and see if I can spot the defect a little bit better, so I wasn't paying attention to it too heavily. So it says player 1 press to continue, and I press it. It says it's my turn to place the waffle. Okay, and I confirm, and then a chunk of butter falls from the sky. So it looks like it enters the shooting state immediately after player 1 transitions out. So it looks like as soon as it transitions out of player 1 placing waffle, it goes straight to player 1 firing, which implies to me that after that if statement terminates, it then executes the rest of it, and that's the problem. So I think I just need to add else's here. And that should fix my woes. In fact, I really should be doing that everywhere. And yes, this is a bizarre format, but I like it better organizationally than the nested else's when you get deep like this into state management hell. Okay, player 1 place the waffle. Player 2 plus ready to continue. Player 2 place your waffle. And now let's try to shoot it. Player 1's turn to fire a shot. Okay, so the stick of butter spawned somewhere and then vanished off the screen. Cool. I mean, it's a start. So it looks like we need some more force. That seems like it was pretty weak. And let's do some other junk here. So we added some force. I think we added it in the right direction. Yeah, it looks like all that stuff happened. Now let's get the quaternion, the rotation down. So we're going to do, we want it to face, so I'm going to have it look towards the target. So it should be, it's shooter.transform.look at gives you a quaternion, I think. Rotate the transform so the forward vector turns at its location. Yeah, I could do that. That's a pretty easy way to handle shot placement. So it'll be shot.transform.look at, and we're going to face the target. Well, if it happens in both, I guess I can recycle it down to there. Actually, a little more refactoring. I now realize I can cycle this down to there if I use shooter. Yeah, refactoring. Okay. And let's see where it is that the stick of butter actually gets created. So confirm, place the waffle there, player 2 confirm, player's all set to go, player 1's ready. Okay, it's player 1's turn to fire a shot. Let's look in the Unity editor and see where it is that this thing actually gets fired. So boom, and then pause. Alright, let's see what happens. So, first the stick of butter ends up over there. Player 1 is hovering over here somewhere if I turn its mesh render on temporarily. So it looks like it got placed in roughly the right area, but it's definitely not facing player 2 or anything, so that's not right. For debugging purposes then, I'm going to go and change my UI manager to never hide the waffle, so I'll just get rid of that for now and help use that in debugging. My first suspicion is that I still haven't cranked up the force enough, so let's crank up the force even more. It's also possible that I messed up my mathematics here with the normalization and the addition of force there, so we'll see. And my stick of butter is obviously way too big for starters, so let's mess around with that. It should be like the quarter of its current size, if that. Let's make the z-axis the larger one and see if that helps it to face the target better. So 1's ready, 1's over here, 2's ready, 2's over there, 1's ready. Okay, 1's turn to fire a shot, and we're going to fire it towards over there, and fire and pause. What happened? Whoa! Goodbye, Butterstick. Your people need you. Where have you gone, Butterstick? Goodbye. It looks like it's firing in the opposite direction of where I wanted the force to go. I think I want it to go towards negative. And yeah, shooter minus target. I'm doing the vector the wrong way. It should be target minus shooter. So I could do that too. Or I could make a negative. Whatever. Anyway, works either way. Okay, parsing everything. Player 1. Okay, I want to fire a shot towards the... This should be the top corner, I think. Yeah, that should be this top corner. So it should go from the bottom to the top corner. Here we go. Boom. Where's my stick of butter? Oh, must not have hit the confirm button. Boom. Ah, it worked. My stick of butter flew straight to that corner. Did you see it? And then it flew off into the abyss forever, but it did fly straight to that corner. Let's do that one more time. So, ready, 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 ready. One to continue. Okay, so does it actually hit the corner? Let's find out. Alright. Butter vision. And on our mark, get set. Almost. Almost. It doesn't quite have the reach, so a little bit more force, because I want it to be able to reach anywhere from anywhere, so let's double it and see. If it can reach corner to corner, you know, actually I should test the most extreme. I think no, on a cube the diagonal is the same length as the sides, I think. I don't know, I'm not a mathematician. It's good enough for government work. Player 1's turn to fire a shot. Does it hit this corner block? Yes, it does, and then it goes flying into the abyss. Fantastic. We can now shoot sticks of butter at one another. And stretching out that z-axis to be the long one was what allowed it to face the target properly. Okay, so now we're going to complete our state transition by adding the player 2 firing state. So if it's player 2 firing, the turn goes back to player 1, we go back into the player 1 firing state, and we fire the projectile as player 2. And then in the player 2 firing state, the only difference is that it has a different text at the top. Player 2's turn to fire, and we're going to show player 2 instead of player 1. I will leave myself a to-do here. To-do, do not transition state until the animation ends. So I'll have to do that later. Cool, that's all set. And looks good. Looks good there too, and then nothing happens in update, and that should be all the states handled. So we should be able to launch sticks of butter at each other now. Let's find out. So I'm going to place player 1 in the top corner over there. Player 2 is going to be in the bottom corner over there, and then they're going to shoot waffles at each other. So, and player 2's turn to shoot. Player 1's turn to shoot. Player 2's turn to shoot. Player 1's turn to shoot. Let's look at how that looks on the phone, I guess. Player 1's turn to... Gotta lock that in a portrait mode later. Player 1's turn to shoot. Player 2's turn to shoot. Okay. So, a couple other things to do, I guess. Another to-do is going to be to mark off the grid you just shot as already shot at. Okay, so that'll be something that you also have to do. That's not a big deal. I got like 15 minutes left, so I could do networking code, but honestly, it's not that interesting for this one anyway, so I'll just skip it. If you want to do any kind of multiplayer networking, I'd rather help you through it on an individual basis, because I don't think this game multiplayer code is going to be really suitable for everybody's purposes. And then I also have to make a new scene and a new state manager that handles the networking. That'll take me the whole 15 minutes probably. So let's go with just getting the projectile functionality to actually work so they actually hit one another. Okay, I'll get rid of hide all waffles, and I'm going to go and create collision and all that crap for butter. So let's go with butter and design butter's collision management. So I'm going to create a new script called projectile. I think all projectiles can just use that if I decide to add more down the road anyway. Let's add projectile to butter stick. And then edit it. So one of the annoying things with Unity physics and stuff is that you don't want projectiles to hit their owner, usually. The easiest hack for that is to register its owner and make sure that it doesn't strike it. I'm going to call this private, and we'll get a set owner. And when we instantiate the projectile, so that happens in my waffle manager, we're going to go shot.get component. We're going to try to find a projectile component in our shot. So we're going to try to access that script. I'll call this projectile. And always do a null check in case you're too stupid to add it to your script, or you come up with a projectile later that doesn't use the same one. Then we're going to say projectile.setOwner, and we're going to set its owner to the shooter so that it ignores it. Okay. And now we want to do a collision thing, so let's do on collider. Collision enter or something. I'm looking it up. It's void on collision enter. Okay, so when the when the stick of butter strikes a target, collision dot game object. The game object whose collider you are colliding with, right? Now grid units don't have a collider, right? Cool, so we can't collide with them. Collision.gameObject. What do I want to do with it? Alright, so if collision.gameObject equals owner, then we're going to do nothing. I think there's actually a dot equals that we want to use instead, that Unity prefers us to use. Yeah. Okay, if not, then we're going to process that collision. And I think the only other collidable thing in the world is the waffle. Waffle doesn't actually have a collider yet. Let's give it one. Make sure it's the right size and everything. I'm actually going to make it the full 1x1 cube, so the waffle actually, or its collider at least, actually occupies the entire space that the waffle occupies. I'm going to apply these changes to prefab. There's a box down there to apply them. That used to be easier. Unity decided they were going to make that more of a challenge. Let me run this again and make sure that all my waffles have colliders now. There's one down there, and there's one, and it's the size of a grid unit. Okay, cool. I mean, it's not great for animation purposes, because your waffle can get clipped when it very clearly didn't get hit, but whatever. Doesn't matter to me. Don't think I need to do any more art today. Okay, so if you've struck a waffle, we need some kind of health system, I guess. So let's go back to our scripts and create a script called waffle health. The less health you have, the deeper you sink into the syrup sea, according to the specifications. I haven't drawn the syrup sea yet. I said I was going to be done with art for the day. Oh boy, I guess I could just draw a big light brown translucent cube, but I don't think that's really going to be that important. So I'll just I'll leave out the syrup sea until later. I'll let the team that gets this use their creative flair on the syrup sea. Waffle health, though, I am going to update. Public and starting health, public and current health, and avoid damage, and amount. I'm mostly going to do it by ones, but I want to support the ability to do it later. Current health, minus equals 1. If current health is less than 0, we'll do a private boolean is dead equals false. Bool is less than 0 is dead equals true. And we will get a check if dead with bool. Check if dead. Turn is dead. Okay. That's probably all we need, frankly. Let's see what else we would need. Less than or equal to 0, I suppose. And not 1, I want to subtract by the amount. Okay, so when your projectile strikes a target, it's going to seek out the other guy's waffle health component. It's going to seek out the other guy's waffle health component, and if it's not null, it's going to do some stuff with it. It's going to do some damage. Hit for some damage. And at that point, we probably want to advance the state too, which means that we need to link either our waffle health or our projectile back to the UI manager to change the state, because after you have been hit, you are permitted to move again, I guess, for whatever reason. reason. So I'm going to link it here. It's a UI manager, which is also my state manager. I decided to make it both. So anytime you get damaged, UI manager dot let's call it a state transition. How do you know which player got hit? How do I know which player was hit? Because it's the player that got hit that gets to place their waffle again. I guess in the waffle health, I'll also manage which player it is. And I'll probably make that, yeah, that's fine. Go with that. Alright. So you have a player number. You're going to tell the UI manager to transition back into the placement state, which is going to be similar to pressing the confirm button, but not quite. So I guess I'll write a new method for it, because I don't think I have anything that's quite like it. Avoid transition state on waffle hit. Oops. Player num. Okay, so if player num equals player 1, we'll do something, otherwise we'll do something else. So we're going to set is awaiting to true, because we're going to go back into the wait screen. It's going to become that person's turn, the person that got hit. It becomes placing player 1 waffle's turn, and then I guess both players get to replace their waffles. That's tough, because if I go back to player 1's placement state and then you hit the confirm button, then it's going to go into a player 2's state immediately after. So I'm going to need to set another flag. Let's call it Boolean game started. It's going to be false by default. Boom. And then it's going to set to true the first time that you place player 2's waffle successfully. And then if the game is not started yet, then we always transition into player 2's placement state. But if the game is started already, then we transition directly into the player 1, or yeah, player 1 firing state. And likewise here, if the game is not yet started, then we transition directly into the player 1 firing state. Otherwise, we transition into the player 2 firing state. I'm probably getting these confused, and I probably should have drawn a better state diagram. Okay. This is going to be placing player 2's waffle, and it's player 2's turn. Yep, that looks good. Okay, and then going back to waffle health, every time damage is done to a waffle, we're going to do the transition state on waffle hit. We're going to link that to player num, which is a property of our health, but really should be a property of another component that we stuck on this object here, something like loyalty management or something. Alright, so to both waffles that we've generated, as prefabs, we now have to set those things up. I think first of all they both need a waffle health component added to them. The starting health for both of them should be 5, and the UI manager for both of them should be linked directly from the scene there. Oh, which I can't do because they're prefabs, right? So then the waffle manager, when it creates these two guys, needs to link player 1 waffles. And then we want to do health dots player num equals 0. We want to do the same thing for this guy. We'll just recycle the same variable, and this guy gets to be 1. And then I also want to find that UI manager in the scene somewhere. And I'm going to do that similarly to how I find the waffle manager. I'm going to use that really expensive call to GameObject.find. So health.UI manager equals GameObject.find UI manager.getComponent UI manager. It only happens once when each waffle is instantiated, so I feel comfortable making that a very expensive system call. Let's see if they actually get instantiated correctly when they spawn. So there's waffle 1 and waffle 2. Actually, neither of them seem to have been linked. Or waffle 2 doesn't seem to have been linked. Yeah, waffle 1 has and waffle 2 hasn't, so let's see what's up with that. I guess recycling them was not a good idea. Although realistically I could do this call just once by saving it. Okay, that guy's linked successfully, and that guy's still not linked successfully, which is really weird. Let's go back to Waffle Manager. Make sure both of them are being successfully instantiated. Yes, they are. That guy's UI manager still isn't linked. Try again with that. Nope, still not establishing that link there. Okay, well I think that's all the time we have for today. I will fix this bug here, and then we've got BattleButters with all the health depleting and stuff. And I don't know, maybe I'll make a syrup explosion animation out of particles real quick. Next week I'll move on to writing another lovely 270 knockoff application, unless anybody has any questions or anything that they'd like me to cover. So keep on working on your projects. Remember that first checkpoint is approaching pretty fast. I think it's like March 11th or something, so I want you to have a functioning, very low effort, kind of not a lot working prototype by then. Maybe I'll take time out at the beginning of next class just to talk to everybody. So try to be in Discord during the class so that if I decide to pop in and just talk to you about your projects, you're available. And alright, thanks for tuning in. See you next week.